Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the newest album from Gorillaz called The Now Now. So I can't be the only one who's a little bit floored that we've got a new Gorillaz album already, can I? I mean, I thought Humans was a good, if uneven, return last year, but it was the sort of project that didn't really herald an era of increased productivity for Damon Albarn's cartoon band. But apparently Albarn enjoyed the process of touring and recording and felt that spark of inspiration return so frequently while on the road that before long, he had another album ready to go. And I will freely admit that some of the buzz was, well, let's be honest and say kind of questionable, as Damon Albarn was looking to frame this album as a lightweight point of reconciliation, something to bring people together across untenable divides before the apocalyptic framing of the last album really snaps into place. And alright, sure, that could be an admirable intention, but for as much as I like the groove behind the single Humility, I wasn't really sure Gorillaz would be able to mine the same emotional pathos and punch out of those particular tones. There's always been an understated, murky, kind of gritty edge to the group at their best that I hope wasn't going to be left behind, and that's not even getting into the socio-political subtext that could very well continue from Humans, and that sort of compromised middle ground might not be the best place for Gorillaz to ultimately land. But alright, what do we get from the Now Now? Well, if I'm being honest, very, very little. And I hate to feel like I'm just joining the larger critical consensus here, but it's hard to deny that in comparison to the greater effort and intensity behind a lot of Humans, the Now Now is a lightweight, borderline indistinct and ephemeral come-down album full of sounds that might fit the tone of summer malaise but does little else. Forget comparison to Gorillaz' glory days in the 2000s. This is the sort of throwaway project that I don't even think I could put in the same category. Not even precisely bad so much as it is utterly forgettable, which for its misshapen blend of funk, psychedelia, hip-hop, electronica, and dream pop, I gotta say it, that's a bit of an issue. And you know, here's the thing. I get that this is more of a vibe album, one intended just to drift into a listless haze in the background when the dance party becomes a little sour, or the afternoon sunshine sparks a bit of a headache. There's only a few token guest appearances from George Benson, Jamie Principle, and Snoop Dogg utterly phoning in yet another guest verse, and the rest is just Damon Albarn's dejected, muffled crooning that I can't help but color any pop groove with that sense of melancholy. And yes, I get that it's intentional. I get that it's part of the point. And since Damon Albarn is one of the original earnest sad boy singer-songwriters, he tends to get a pass on the fact that Gorillaz, they have better than average grooves and occasionally a really decent catchy hook. But say what you will about how scattered Humans could feel at a lot of points, and that is a messy album, there was at least a sense of urgency to give it some momentum and character, something that the Now Now increasingly does not have in the waves of glittery synth funk, atonal shifts, and warping hints of drippy psychedelic acoustic guitars that can't help but feel like fragments more than anything completely distinct. Yes, the sunnier touches around George Benson's guitar work on Humility, they sound really good. And the sharper, darker synth funk groove of Tranz, it manages to keep some momentum, but from there the mix begins to dissolve into permutations of funk that are all burbling tone but no greater texture or tension. The stiff and stuttering percussion of Kansas and Sorcerers, the flat atonal warping of Idaho, which against the watery touches doesn't really capture any permutation of that rocky state that I've ever experienced, or even the increasingly brittle 1% that literally sounds like it's falling apart after the unstable paranoia and melancholy that came through on Fireflies, all ending on the drippy acoustics of Souk as Albarn turns back towards Earth. And look, beyond Kansas, I would struggle to say that any of these tones are precisely bad or disagreeable. Kansas just has the bad luck of having no real momentum with sloppily mixed cleaner vocals and a really ugly stiffness in the percussion that I did not like at all. But by the second half of the album, I would say I'd struggle to say this is even good music to get stoned to, with no real deeper organic folk or pop texture. The most that I can really appreciate are some of the bass grooves, and even they can start lose focus. Now, all this would be somewhat excusable if the lyrical content came to work in some dimension. And remember how I started off the review kind of concerned about how this album could be trying to heal a greater, wider divide and wind up in compromise and kind of an unfortunate situation there? Well, that subtext is kind of there, but this album is aiming for much higher concepts. This is not Frank Turner's Be More Kind, or even directly referencing the dystopian storytelling of humans. And yet on the one hand, there are some intriguing ideas here. Hollywood might be your standard deconstruction of the flashy hedonism of the town, but Albarn is narrowing in on the paranoia and scattered highs that he can experience through it. Two sides of the same coin in a tangled haze that he keeps trying to connect to, especially as one side tends to support and then undercuts the other. And there is a tangible divide that you can tell that he's trying to find some way to span to bring everybody together, be it the reckless journey home to reconcile on Kansas, or the tunnel spanning half the world on the glorified interlude Lake Zurich. But yet, when he tries to transcend it all by staring skyward in a blur of skyward soaring, and I'll give 1% some points for actively capturing the aesthetic of orbiting loneliness beyond our world, it is that tangled magic of Los Angeles that brings him falling back to Earth to span all its contradictions once again. And if all this sounds kind of abstract and detached, not making a lot of sense, well, that's not uncommon with Gorillaz. You can expect that given their ongoing narrative, but the Now feels, not so much detached or fragmented, but kind of oblique in its own internal headspace that's got some earnest charm to it through the delivery, even if it doesn't bother to make a lot of sense or have a lot of connective tissue or not even really tie into the larger narrative. But again, with a vibe album, you can make the argument that's all you really need to make it work, but on the other hand, if you're looking for a record that has any sort of grounding texture to engage with the audience, the Now by Gorillaz, it doesn't even really try. It kind of exists in its own space, and while I can see the appeal in the short term, it just feels formless and undercooked, with no deeper sense of tension or grounded melancholy or even darkening of the mellower tones. It just doesn't really come together and pay off some of those greater lyrical ideas. And if all that's your thing, I don't know, go have fun. But you can't tell me that this rises to the level of Gorillaz' work in the 2000s, and I'd argue even Humans hit some better high points. So for me, 5 out of 10, I really can't recommend it to anybody beyond the diehard fans, and you've already heard it in our commenting down below. If you're curious, give it a try, but don't say I didn't warn you that this trip might leave you kind of underwhelmed when you come out on the other side. Just saying. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I know you guys probably aren't going to like this review, but hey, you want to buy the record, links down there below, polls over there, y'all can tell me how wrong I am. Now, as some of you might know, I'm coming up on my 5th year anniversary on YouTube. And as you know, for every one of my anniversary videos, I tend to do a vote on what records from the previous year I get to cover. Only this time, the voting is in a different place. If you go to my community tab, I have placed a specific post there where you guys can comment and vote. You only get one vote, and if you include multiple records in your comment, I will choose the one I want, not the one you want. Just friendly warning you there. Voting will continue until probably this Saturday or maybe Sunday. Well, it depends on how many votes we end up getting. But until then, I want you guys to go check it out. I'm really looking forward to what you guys choose going into the next week, which looks to be pretty light, thank God. But, hey, if you guys want to get involved in my schedule, the link to my Patreon is right over there, where 3 times a week you guys get to vote on my schedule, and once a week for the higher tier contributors, you guys get to add albums, movies, or even a top 10 list to that schedule. Want to see it? It's on my Instagram, link down there below. Anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'd be happy to hear it. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.